About 5 years ago, I kept having dreams about having another child. We agreed that we did not need to have another child for us, but it kept laying on my heart. And so I talked to my doctor, and she said that I would be a perfect candidate and she would let me know. So last March, I get a message from my doctor that said, I have someone that I want you to meet. I did not know what it was about. I didn't know anything really. And so I texted her, or messaged her actually. And she's like, you just need to meet this woman and find out her story and see if you want us to carry a baby for her. Immediately, I was messaging her, the lady, and we met the next day. And as soon as we met them, Anthony and I both went, and it was her and her husband. And as soon as we met, it felt right. They had children in the past, and she had to have a hysterectomy after her last so she could no longer carry them. So they still had these frozen embryos, and so she was just looking for someone to carry them for her. I don't even know if I gave her a chance to see if I was right, because I just was like, this is it, this is gonna happen. I mean, we were hugging and crying and everything before we left. Of course, Anthony and I talked about it afterwards, but we knew that was what God was intending us to do.
Well, I think part of it was explaining it to our kids, and Molly did a great job of that, but do we tell them right then, or do we wait for it to be successful, or like there's just that fine timeline for not getting their hopes up in case something went wrong.
I mean, I did have the baby early. She was 25, I was 25 weeks pregnant. She faced a lot of complications, and that was hard for me. Maybe that I felt like a failure, that I had let that mom down. But she's good now. The chaos, I don't know, it felt so right that it didn't add a lot more stress on the outside. We had to keep reminding each other that this was God's plan. Everyone wants to know, how's the relationship going to be now that so I am an aunt, kind of like an uncle, and then my kids say they have a surrogate sister. Or whenever they told me like it was time, I had to call him back to the hospital from work, and because I would never have wanted to do anything like that without you by my side, or without him. So I think we're stronger than ever. Cool. I would do it again.
Well, I was glad our film crew had the foresight to capture that while they were with Molly and Anthony as they were talking about their relationship, that story. And one of the main reasons is because that centers around one of the key ideas that we're going to be looking at today when it comes to our relationships, and that is just getting over our self-centeredness. And I'm not so sure that's not the best demonstration that you may hear in a while, just coming out of someone's life, as Molly is just a hero to so many of us around him here. It is a privilege to be able to stand on a platform. I was thinking about this and speak to 3 different campuses where I know there are literally hundreds of mothers that I can say to you a very, very happy Mother's Day. And I want all of you across all campuses to just give it up for all the mothers right now in a way that's worthy of who they are. Yeah. And I once had the opportunity to sit in a room with some mothers, and being a dad, I know the parent thing, I get it, but I've always understood that motherhood has a different dimension to it that dads don't have. And I asked them what they thought it was, and set me up for something, but really what their answer is that they said from the time you're pregnant all the way through, for the rest of your life, technically speaking, your kids never leave your mind, ever, in one form or the other. Your kids are always in there. There's a great book out called Men Are Like Waffles, Women Are Like Spaghetti. Okay, it really is a great book. But what that's getting to is painting a picture of the male and the female brains. Men's brains can be compartmentalized like waffles. They can think in squares. And the kids are one of the squares, but they can go on to the next square, and they don't kind of ride around with that in there. Women physiologically have more interaction between the hemispheres of their brains. And so their brains are like spaghetti, where everything's kind of mixed in together, where kids are like the sauce, just kind of in there, and it's all kind of mixed in there together. So it technically never goes away. So mothers, thank you for doing that and being that. That's going to be an interesting experience, to say the least. You know, also what we do need to remember, though, on Mother's Day is we know this can be a very, very sweet time for many of you, but also a bitter time for some. And there's lots of reasons for that. For some, this is the day that you remember a mom who has passed away, or a child who has passed away. Some of you did not have an ideal mom, and so Mother's Day is kind of this thing of, wow, I wish I could have had this, something like that. Others of you just have desperately wanted to be a mother, and life has kept you from that. And that's hard. So Mother's Day, we all need to be aware of that. And so what I want to do is I want to pray for moms in all these different situations that today brings up, from the good to the hard, and then we'll go forward from there. Let's pray together. Father, in Jesus' name, thank you so much that I love the fact that our country and around the world, we're celebrating Mother's Day. And it's worthwhile to celebrate, because you have made that where that's what we all have in common. And selflessness is at the definition of our lives. And they were called on to do that. And I thank you for that and the care that they gave, that we easily forget. The nights up where we were screaming, all of us, because we were hungry, and there was patience, there was love, and there was care and commitment that's easy to forget about. Lord, I pray that each mother will feel a sense of your joy today and goodness. I pray for those who desperately need comfort today to experience that. And you alone know each situation of everyone and how they view this day and what it does. But I pray that you'll use that as an entry into each life in a very, very special way. We ask you to take the remaining moments that we have in our services to bring that alive for all of us. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, we're in a series called Common Chaos, and what we did is we kind of got together and we said, okay, what are the most common problems that people tend to have in their lives these days? And we came down on 3: relationships, addictions, and stress. And what I'm going to do today is we're going to do one more installment of the relationship piece, but we're going to build a bridge over into the addiction part of things towards the end. And believe it or not, there is a relationship between those things. And then next week, we will zero in and just do exclusively on addiction. So I hope you'll just kind of consider that and take that in. But what I want to do before I get any kind of new stuff today, I want to reach back over the last couple of weeks and give a very, very strong reminder, because what we've talked about in terms of relationships over the last couple of weeks, there's 2 principles that I'm hoping that once this series is gone, that you will remember. I don't expect you to remember a whole lot, but I'm really hoping that God will give us all the ability to remember 2 specific things about relationships that we've said so far. And the first one's this: is there supreme value? The Bible has been saying it for 2,000 years, that love is the greatest thing. Love for God, love for people is the greatest thing of all of life. If you want to get your priorities right, get your relationship life together, and that should be at your highest priority of your life, no matter what else you do. Life is made up of a lot of things, but love ought to be the number one. Love for God, love for people. The value of it. All the way down to, we've talked about how I've been researching a bunch of scientific data and all the rest of these kinds of things. And one of the things that they've proven, you can know this, the Bible's been saying it for 2,000 years, but science is now saying it. If you want to have a happy and meaningful life, your relationships are where that's going to take place. That's going to be the place. If your relationships are healthy and vibrant, that will tend to make your life healthy and vibrant, all the way down to your physical health. If you have unhealthy relationships, it affects you physically. There's a great article, and it sounds morbid, but I really encourage you to read an article called The 5 Regrets of the Dying. The 5 Regrets of the Dying. It's a blog post written by a woman who was a palliative care nurse for many, many years. And so she spent her time with people in the last weeks and days of their lives. And she reflected back and said, what did they tend to talk about the most? What did they tend to regret the most? And she wrote The 5 Regrets of the Dying. I'm not going to give you all 5, but I will give you one. One of the regrets of the dying is this: I wish I would have stayed in better touch with my friends. She said that everybody, when they're on their deathbed, wants their friends, wants their loved ones, wants love. That's just how it is. And so why not, while you have health, while you have life, and you're not in that spot? And science would tell you that, and the Bible would tell you that, and everything else. Now, the second one is this, and this is the one we gave last week that I'm hoping that you'll always remember well past this series, is this. Love is, first, a proactive pursuit, not a passive experience. Love is first a proactive pursuit, not a passive experience. Listen to this passage that's found in the New Testament where a guy's coaching. He's just saying, this is what a church ought to look like. He's writing them a letter and he says, this is how you ought to be. This is how you ought to think. This is how you ought to travel through your life. It says in Ephesians chapter 4, follow God's example, therefore, as dearly loved children, and walk in the way of love, just as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us as a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. Walk in the way of God. For ancient people, your walk was where you were going, as a metaphor in life. They thought of how's he walking? It meant their values, it meant their direction, it meant the whole of their life was marked by what? And he's saying, listen, everybody in the church, anybody in your life, walk in the way of love. Make your walk about love. And what's cool about it, and what we discovered, is that the Bible puts this thing that's the most important thing of all in the area of our proactive activity. It's not so much about our experiential feelings first. We tend to think of love in our culture as what I receive, what comes towards me. The Bible always talks about it in terms of choices and therefore commitments and decisions that you can make. And the beauty of that is, that means you're not stuck. If you don't have the kind of relationships that you would love to have, you can make choices to move in a better direction. If you're lonely, you can make choices. You can get training, you can get counseling, you can get help. If our relationships are not exactly where they ought to be and where we wish they were healthier, you can make choices, you can do things, you can change things. This whole idea that love is a proactive pursuit is a very freeing idea. So here's what I want to do. Putting those two ideas together, love is the highest value of all, and love is something that is proactive. It can be acted on. I want to ask you this. What's the logical conclusion of what we ought to do with our lives? If it really is, and again, science has shown this. I want to give you a counselor, what one counselor said, who spends his entire life working with people in their relationships. He said, quote, look at marriage and relationships as no different than acquiring an education or attaining a skill set for employment. It takes work, daily work for harmony, joy, and peace. Now that doesn't sound like love in the soft sense, but counselors and people that deal with relationships all the time will always tell you, take action, think of it as acquiring skill sets. But my question is this, if it's the highest value and you can think of it as attaining a skill set, what skill set should you be getting? What's the logic behind there that says, okay, I ought to probably be doing things? Well, one of the things, there's lots of skill sets you can have with love. Conflict resolution would be a great thing to learn. Learning people's love languages would be a great thing to learn. But what I want to do today is I looked, as I've been researching, I was looking at all the Bible data and I was looking at all the scientific data and everything else. I came down on one. I want to give one skill today that many would say, counselors and scientists and everybody else would say, if you want to improve your relationships and up your relational game in your life, one skill, if you could only pick one, here it is. You want to know what it is? Learn to listen. Learn to listen. I'm sure some of you are out there like, what did he say? No. Learn to listen. One person put it this way. There was a counselor who had gone out and studied what's the key to great relationships. She said, quote, the single most powerful step you can take to keep a relationship solid, question mark, speak less and listen more. Speak less and listen more. It sounds a whole lot like a passage found in James in the Bible, chapter 1. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. My dear brothers, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. Take time to listen. Now, as soon as you hear that, if I were in your shoes, I'd hear me say that and go, oh man, really? That sounds kind of lightweight, it's, okay, listen, I got it. But I'm not talking about listen as I heard you say that you wanted mustard and ketchup on your cheeseburger. It's not that kind of listening. When I say listen, Listen is a multi-dimensional thing. It's not just what we think about hearing things. And I really want to encourage you, what we're going to do in here in a moment is look at what I call the 4 dimensions of listening. It has to do with more than just hearing people say things. It involves a lot more. Now, the second thing I need to say before I go into this, and integrity demands this of me, okay, before I get into this subject today. I've been married for 32 years and happily married, and things are better than they ever have been. Wife and I do wonderful. It's all those things. But if you were to pull her aside and say, Mrs. Nicholson, what's your greatest frustration with the good Reverend Nicholson? I know exactly what she'd say. He doesn't listen. He doesn't listen. He's not good at listening. Now, I could give you lots of kind of funny examples, but I'm not going to, because I was watching all this research data. I was like, and that's all they talk about. You know, these scientists, what do they know? You know, they just kept saying it over and over. You want to make your relationships better, whether it's marriage or friendships or anything else, listen, 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 listen. And I was like, wow, this is a really, really big deal. And I've treated it like not a big deal, if I'm being honest. And after 32 years, you would think she'd lost hope, and maybe she has. But hopefully I can give her for Mother's Day someone that listens just a little bit better. Now here's the sideline of this though. My wife, I'm hoping to give her that gift, but she would be making a mistake though. If she listened to the rest of what I had to say today and what we're talking about today as for me, although I know she's hoping. And because every single one of us in talks like this, the worst habit we have is, boy, I hope they're getting this. I hope my spouse is listening really, really close. That's okay to hope that. But I've heard professional counselors have told me the most frustrating experience they have is they know that when they're talking to 2 people or more, that people are thinking, I hope the other person is getting this. Because here's the thing, and science will also tell you this, and counselors will always tell you this, you can't change someone else. You can't. You know who you can change? You, that's it. You can do some things that may be conducive to helping someone change, but the only person you can change is you. So I want to challenge you, before I give these dimensions of listening and hearing, to think about you. You know what the Bible says several times in several different ways? Each one of us will give an account of ourselves to God. It's kind of a frightening prospect. In other words, when you appear before God, you're going to get your chance, and it's going to be about you. It's not going to be about your wife. It's not going to be about your husband. It's not going to be about your coworkers, your friends, or anything. He's going to talk to you about you. So hear it for you. 4 dimensions of listening. The first one is this. Be interested. Be interested. See, most of us, well, all of us except Molly, who was in that film a while ago, suffer from terminal self-centeredness, okay? Most of it, we just do. To be human is to think that the world revolves around me or you. No, if you think it's you, it's really me. And you're thinking, no, it doesn't revolve around you, it revolves around me. This is what we do. We're terminally self-centered. Listen to this passage where in another place, the same writer was coaching an early church. Here's what you guys ought to think about. Here's how you ought to live. Here's how you ought to look at life. He says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interest, but also to the interest of others. Also to the interest of others. Now, on one hand, what that means is, if you could get a relationship coach, and I think they actually have those. You know what a relationship coach would tell you? If you ever want to make better friends or deepen your relationships, try to be interested before you try to be interesting. Try to be interested before you try to be interesting. Most of us think our idea of a great conversation is waiting for the other person to stop so we can start. It's our turn now, I've heard a couple different coaches I admire a whole lot. They said their approach to conversation is this. I look at every single person in life, no matter who they are, no matter where they're from or where I encounter them, is they have something they can teach me because they know something I don't. That's what it means to be interested. But it's not just about listening and being interested in people. There's another dimension to all this. And notice that they always base this on what Christ has done. Because you know what Christ did and know how he defined love itself? He said, greater love has no one than he should lay down his life for his friends. We had another high school shooting, another one this past week. And one of the stories that came out of it was this story of heroism when one of this 18-year-old kid rushed the gunman, lost his life, literally. And I pray that none of us ever has that choice to make in life. And the odds are that most of us will never be called upon to literally lay down our lives. But you know how you can lay down your life? You get the opportunity every day, all the time. Is I'm going to be less self-interested and more other-interested. I'm going to ask an occasional question. I encourage you to do an audit of your talking. How much in the course of a conversation comes out of your mouth versus how much do you ask for something to come out of someone else? Be interested. The second one's this dimension of listening. Be present. Be present. Okay, this is my foul ball, all right? I live a lot in my head. I have a lot of ideas. I love theology. I love philosophy. I love what I do in my life. I love politics. I love to live inside of here and think about all the grand problems of life and all these things. But that is why I don't listen very well to my wife. I have the gift of being able to be in a room and not be in that room. Here, I can do that. I'm very gifted at that. And, I can sit in the same place. But I have a feeling, my one comfort is that I know I'm not alone. I think there's a lot of people out there like that. Now, here's the sympathy to all of us, is that we live, did you know that we live in the age of human history where we are seeing more information come our direction to distract us than any other generation in the history of the human race. And we all know that it's due to one item in our lives anymore. And speaking of, Mrs. Nicholson, would you toss me my phone that I forgot to bring up here? Because I don't usually bring my phone up here. Sorry, just toss it. It's fine. Be funny if I dropped it. I told you not to. You didn't listen. We all know this is the culprit. I've heard couples say things like that. This thing's ruining our relationship. Speaking of addictions, a whole lot of us got that addiction. We'll talk about that next week. Now, I think I might have the solution to the problem. And it's not throw it away. Okay, I really do think. But we know this is a problem. Have you ever been in a restaurant where you've looked over at a booth and there's literally like a family sitting there and every single one of them is doing like this? They're not talking to each other, they're looking at another thing. There's been studies on this. One scientist said, quote, the sight of a cell phone reminds people of the broader social community outside themselves that they can access via texting in the internet. They've tested people that you can't do complex activities, even focus on other people, even if you can see your phone sitting there. Because it creates in this, you know that there's a gateway to another world. Even if you see it, even if it's face down, it does take your mind away. It opens you to a different thing. But here's the solution, I would say. It would start with celebrate. Celebrate these little things. I saw one article where a guy said, do you know that your phone, the typical smartphone, replaces as many as 50 different individual items that used to be individual items? Everything from call it radio, to library, to cameras, video cameras, still cameras, everything else. Directions. Boys and girls, I remember a day when to get directions, sometimes you rolled down your window and said, hey, do you know how to get to such and such? Yeah, I do. Okay, you go up here about a quarter mile, hang a right, all right? Now, it's a hard right. Hard right, and then you go up about another 2 miles. And these are country miles, not city miles, you understand. And then right there, you're going to see this one tree, and then you're going to bend around this way, go up a hill and over. Now, there's going to be a drive, and it's rock. Don't mistake that for the road that you're going to. And I don't miss those days like at all, okay? Right now, I can tell my phone, take me there, and he tells me how to get there. So these things ought to be celebrated. He said you've got 50 different items it replaces that if you wanted to replace and carry around on your person, it would weigh 75 pounds worth of stuff. I've got 514 books in my personal library just in here. If we were to take people from 100 years ago and beam them into our modern day, they would think we were carrying around magic wands. It's amazing. So it's okay for these to be amazing. Well, no wonder we're all going like this. Everything in life's on there. However, let's acknowledge, hey, come on, these things are really, truly getting in the way. So why not just set up some parameters? It's all right to do that. And moms, you're great at this stuff. It is okay to say, and literally, let's put these in a box during our mealtime. That way we can focus on one another. They'll be in the box when you're done. Because again, they said seeing their presence will take your mind away. And that's what my wife and I have decided to do, to help me listen better. We're going to set little tones on there where if there is a call that I really should take, just like in the old days. I also remember when the phone was on the wall. That's kind of a neat thing. Some of you young people are going, dang, you are old, dude. Why do they still let you up there, you know? But come up. Just acknowledge. Third thing is this, in listening. Be empathetic. Be empathetic. There was another one of these research projects where one lady went out and said, she wanted to look at all the great relationships, long-term relationships, loving relationships. She's like, what is the secret sauce for these great loving relationships? And she concluded this: what truly makes a relationship thrive and provides the key to long-lasting love is what she labeled emotional responsiveness. Emotional responsiveness. I would use it synonymously with empathy. Empathy. If you want a rich and lasting and deepening relationship, it's responding to the other person's emotions in their life. If they're angry, you kind of get into that place. If they're hurting, you get into this place. Let me give you a definition, kind of the scientific definition of empathy. Quote, empathy is the capacity to understand or feel what another person is experiencing from within their frame of reference. That is the capacity to place oneself in another's position. The Bible puts it wonderfully this way, kind of more simply. It says in Romans chapter 12, another coaching moment from this letter. Rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. Rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. In other words, respond. If people are celebrating something, don't be the wet blanket. Don't be the topper. Don't be, oh man, you think that's great. Mine was greater. Or don't be, man, I don't see how that's going to work. Don't be that person. Get inside their emotions. It works the same way for grief. There's a great picturesque line in the book of Proverbs on this whole thing. Quote from Proverbs chapter 25, like one who takes away a garment on a cold day, or like vinegar poured on a wound, is one who sings songs to a heavy heart. Isn't that a neat picture? You just picture someone who's freezing, trying to get warm, has got a garment on, and you, if you come up and you see someone grieving, and you say, yeah, come on, women who have miscarried get this a lot. Oh, you can have other children. It's like just taking off. So I'm already freezing. You just took off something that was keeping me from being more freezing. Empathy is the capacity to mirror someone's emotion, and you'll see a ton of this out there when it comes to counseling and everything else. It is the key to really long-lasting relationships. What I need from you first, as my friend, as my spouse, as anyone in my life, I need you to see what I'm doing and then get inside that for yourself. Empathy. I was going through a really rough time in my life just a few years ago, emotionally hurting and all the rest. And I had a number of times I'd been under the coaching, I'd been to lectures done by a guy named Henry Cloud. Now, Henry Cloud is a national level psychiatrist, theologian, he's written a ton of books. He's run whole clinical units that he started. He is a heavy in the psychiatric world, okay? But I'd been under his lectures many, many times, loved him, but I'd never talked to him personally or met him. Well, I'm going through this kind of really, really hard time, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to see what Henry Cloud has to say about this. Now, he probably makes about $2,000 an hour, and I was thinking in my mind, well, I'm going to get him for 10 minutes for free. That's what I'm going to go for. So I kind of creeped on him a little bit, watched for him to kind of clear up. And I came up to him, and I said, Dr. Cloud, I admire you and everything else, and I want to honor your time, but if you wouldn't mind giving me 10 minutes, I just really want to share something with you to get your input. He said, absolutely. He sat me down in a chair. I told him my deal. No, he did. I will never forget this as long as I live. When I was done telling my story, he put his hand on my knee, and he looked at me with misty eyes, and he said, that's got to be so hard. That's got to be so hard. You know what he did? Now, maybe I know was making $2,000 an hour. You probably get pretty good at that. But he knew to do it. But you know what he was doing? He was imagining inside his own mind, what would it be like for me to be in the very same position? That's empathy. Let me give you one more dimension of listening before we go. And it's this. Be committed. Be committed. I've seen over and over and over again where counselors will coach you. if you really want to take your relationships to a deeper place, listen and then empathize. But what needs to be resident inside you as you're talking to your friend or your spouse or your kid or whoever is a discernible commitment to the relationship. That the relationship itself is not threatened, no matter what we're talking about, even if we're upset with one another, even if we're angry at one another, the relationship itself is committed to. And moms, you are world class. That's what we rely on. Those of you who are functional, that we're celebrating, you do that. That's who moms are. I know you're not going anywhere. I know you're not going out of my life. I might even just say harsh things to you, but you're not moving. And that is absolutely essential to listening. It's being able to communicate. The relationship is not on the line here. I want you to think about something. We said we were going to kind of bridge over to addictions. One of the things that studies have shown is that for someone to break an addiction, those 4 dimensions are what they need. They need to have someone interested in this walk that I'm going through in my life. They need someone who is going to be present. You know what 12-step programs are? 12-step programs are really that built-in thing. When you arrive in a 12-step program, you're surrounded by people who love you and care about you and are interested in your life, and they listen more than they talk if they're functioning right. And then you're given a sponsor. And you know what a sponsor is? Someone who's committed to you. I'm not going anywhere. I know you're going to have your ups and downs. I know everything else. Heard this guy, this scientist, talk through a fascinating thing that they discovered about addiction patterns. And it used to be in the days, they learned a lot about it from addiction by sticking rats in cages. Now, I don't believe human beings are rats, but that's how they do scientific experiments. Put rats in cages, and they put heroin in one water bottle, and they put just water in another water bottle. And they noticed that the rats kept going to the heroin bottle. Hey, it must be appealing. That was kind of their conclusion. But another researcher in the Netherlands, he said, why don't we try something different? Let's put the heroin in one bottle and put the water in another. But let's make a rat heaven out of the rat cage. I mean, put everything in there that rats like, the cheese and other rats and tunnels to run through and garbage or whatever they're into, He said, let's make a rat heaven. You know what they discovered with other rats around and a bunch of other stuff to do? The rats didn't even like the heroin. They always went to the water. Now, the message is very simple. God didn't build us like rats, but he built us to observe those kinds of things where you know what everybody's desperately longing for? Is people to be interested, for people to be committed around us, to people to be present when they are with us. And that literally has an impact, and there's a bunch of stuff that we'll talk about next week around that very principle of key to overcoming addictions and problems and getting further on in life. Now think about this. It's exactly what Jesus did. And that's not just a shoehorn connection. The God of the universe came as a man. That's the greatest Christian revelation. He came in the person of Jesus, and he identified with us. He went through what we went through. He walked next to us, and he listened to who we were, and took an interest and laid down his life for us. That's the beauty of the gospel. And if there's never, ever been a time in your life that you've never received what God has given, that's exactly what he's offering. Someone who's interested, someone who's laid down their life. Someone's empathetic. He gets where you've been because he's walked this walk, and he's absolutely, utterly, and totally committed to you. He demonstrated it by dying on the cross. Now, here's what we're going to do. Ironically, I'd like you to take out your phones, because you all have them, and you've been dying to do it anyway. And I want you to kind of get some isolation time there where you are. You don't have to close your eyes, but just kind of take your head down and pull up a place where you can take notes on your phone. It's a place you can put notes. And I want you to think of 3 people in your life. Name them. Then in the coming days, you are going to commit yourself to action to be more interested in them, to be more present for them, to be more empathetic with them, and to be more committed to them. And just take a moment of silence to write those things down.